Έβγαλε σήμερα το Direct Communication σε ένα βίντεο που μιλάνε για το FC26. Δεν έχω προλάβει να το δω. Ήταν, λέει, και μιλάνε για το gameplay του FC26, για το responsiveness. Όπα. Για το online gameplay responsiveness μιλάνε. Περίμενε.
And this year there's a lot of improvements that we're doing to make sure the game is more responsive than ever. So the first thing that we did is we worked closely with the community, with pro players, with the design council and different players around the world to understand their experience, understand how they are experiencing the input delay, how is the online gameplay responsiveness for them. And we didn't want to just listen to the feedback, we wanted to experience the issues ourselves. So we actually traveled to Europe to meet with pro players at their esports studios, we met with content creators at their homes. And we gather basically a lot of information that allows us to measure.
Ταξιδέψανε εκεί που παίζουν οι pro για να δουν τι γίνεται με το responsiveness. Το θέμα είναι ότι εκεί που παίζουν οι pro, οι περισσότεροι παίζουν από χώρες που έχουν 10, 12, 8 MS. Ελάτε μια βολτάκια από εδώ να το συζητήσουμε λίγο περισσότερο. Τέλος πάντων, πάμε να δούμε.
Their connections, understand their setups, discuss cases directly with them and really get to the bottom of a lot of the causes for input delay. There's a lot of learnings out of that. And I can separate the learnings into two different areas. The first part is that input lag, input delay, or online gameplay responsiveness is a very complex space.
Ωραία, ναι. Πάμε input delay, ωραίο.
What I can say is that every frame matters in the game. And with that, we know that the FC community is very capable of detecting even the most minimum delay in the game.
Δεν ξέρω αν το λέει τώρα για πείραγμα. Λέει ότι το community του FC, ρε παιδί μου, μπορεί να βρει και το μικρότερο delay που υπάρχει στο παιχνίδι. Το μικρότερο delay στο παιχνίδι όμως τέλος πάντων. Ας δούμε τη συνέχεια.
So we need to make sure the game is the most responsive possible and that's priority for us. That's the first learning.
Ωραία.
The second learning is that input delay is experienced differently across the different players. So when we talk to people, they were telling us different things. So for example, some people experience input delay the entire match, where every input is delayed. Some people experience it only in certain moments, certain specific actions, certain animations.
Εδώ καλά τα λέει, λογικό, έτσι είναι το delay. Σωστό.
That's one example. Some people experience it matches. Some people experience it both offline and online. And like that, there's many different examples based on location, based on server.
πάντως σωστό το λέει.
So there's a lot basically to get into. Next learning is that there's multiple sources of input delay. There's not just one thing that is introducing it. It can be related to animations. It can be related to how the game reads the inputs. There's different things that we will be discussing in the next few minutes. The next one also is that we can confirm that most of the...
Ο κύριος που μιλάει στο βίντεο αυτή τη στιγμή, ο Sam Rivera, είναι στο development του gameplay του παιχνιδιού.
Issues that the community was reporting was experiencing are issues that can be experienced.
Είναι senior producer.
Both in online play and offline play. Most of those again are related to how animations work in the game, and we'll talk a little bit more in a bit about it.
Ναι, ο κύριος Σάμι Ριβέρα είναι από αυτούς που ακούνε πολλά από άτομα τα οποία ψάχνουν να βρουν κάποιον ο οποίος είναι μέσα στην ομάδα. Ο κύριος Σάμι Ριβέρα είναι, ναι.
There's also factors that influence experience or have an effect on the experience that perhaps apply to any game, not just FC, but that are very good to just mention, or it's just about information around these topics. So, for example, playing through Wi-Fi, that's not going to be...
Εντάξει, βέβαια προς το παρόν είναι 4 λεπτά, το βίντεο είναι 15 λεπτά. Προς το παρόν το μόνο που έχει πει είναι ότι υπάρχουν αυτά τα είδη delay και εξηγεί πώς έχουμε delay. Δηλαδή, αν έχει delay κάποιος, από ποια προβλήματα πρόκειται το delay. Αυτή τη στιγμή λέει μια γενική κουβέντα. Προχωράμε όμως. Δηλαδή, μας εξηγεί ποια είναι τα delay και από πού προέρχονται τα delay. Όπως το Wi-Fi λέει τώρα.
And we know that more than 50% of FC players are playing through Wi-Fi. So if possible, it would be great to switch to Ethernet.
Να πάμε σε καλώδιο Ethernet.
Learning, for example, is that the TV options or the TV settings.
Λέει για τις τηλεοράσεις και τα monitor που έχουν όχι gaming settings. Κάνουμε κλασική κουβέντα αυτή τη στιγμή προς το παρόν, ναι.
So regardless of your connection, regardless of how fast your players are, you're going to feel like the game is delayed. So there's multiple factors that contribute to online gameplay responsiveness, but that's just the first part of the learnings.
Bravo.
Then the second part is actually where we are doing many changes this year
Ωραία, αυτό
to
θέλουμε να
make the
ακούσουμε.
experience better.
Πάμε, εδώ είμαστε.
So the first one is around animation coverage. So when we were analyzing cases that we found with the community, that we discovered with the community, in many of those cases, in the game basically didn't have the animations to perform what was requested. So for example, when fast incoming ball at me and my request is a pass 180 degrees, it's a long pass. So sometimes that's very difficult to perform in real life. And then that's also going to be difficult for us that can perform that action in the game. So in some cases, the game decides to just stop the ball and then make the pass, creating a little bit of a delay.
Αυτό όντως συμβαίνει. Καλά το λέει εδώ πάντως προς το παρόν, όντως λέει. Που πολλές φορές κάνουμε κάποιες δύσκολες παλιές σε γωνίες που κανονικά δεν βγαίνει τόσο εύκολα παλιά, που καμιά φορά βλέπουμε τον παίκτη να κοντρολάρει την μπάλα και μετά να τη στέλνει την μπάσα, παρόλο που το έχει πατήσει με τη μία. Προς το παρόν καλά τα λέει. Να δούμε τώρα τι έχει να πει για το F26 όμως. Τον animation. Ωραία, ναι. Τα animation που το λέμε και που το συζητάμε. Ναι, ναι. Ωραία. Ωραία.
That's the first area. The next area is around our animation system. And our animation system is arguably one of the most complex systems that we have in the game, because it has to select animations based on the context. Where is the ball? Where are the opponents? How the player is moving? What's the angle of the player? The speed of the get to the ball? Or can I do an extra step based on the urgency of the play? And then sometimes in that system, there's bugs or there's things that need to be balanced differently. For example, I want to take a shot immediately, and I could perhaps do that shot with my left foot, but that is my weak foot. So the system may decide, no, let's delay the shot a little bit to take the shot with the right foot because that's your strong foot. But then that means there can be a delay, and then if there's an opponent, maybe you get tackled. So we know that we need to prioritize animations in a way to create more responsiveness in the game and maybe select the left foot in this example. So like that, there can be multiple different...
Πολύ ενδιαφέρον αυτό που είπε μόλις τώρα. Λέει, υπάρχουν πολλές περιπτώσεις που θέλω να κάνω, λέει, ένα shoot first time. Και θέλω ο παίκτης μου να σουτάρει όπως έχει την μπάλα πάνω του με το αριστερό του πόδι. Αλλά επειδή σου λέει τι συνέβαινε μέχρι τώρα, έτσι, και τι πάνε να αλλάξουν στο νέο παιχνίδι. Αλλά λέει, μέχρι τώρα τι γινότανε, αν ο παίκτης σου ήταν δεξιοπόδαρος και σε έκανε στο first time με την μπάλα να πηγαίνει στο αριστερό του πόδι, το παιχνίδι διάβαζε το animation και λέει ότι το καλό του πόδι είναι το δεξί. Άρα θα περιμένω να πάει στο δεξί για το first time. Και δεν θα κάνω first time ακριβώς όταν το πατάς εσύ, γιατί θα πάει στο αριστερό του και είναι το weak foot. Και λέει τώρα ότι αυτό το αλλάζουμε εμείς και εμείς βάζουμε πάνω απ' όλα τα animation και προχωράμε την κουβέντα.
Issues that can happen in the game. However, we're fixing dozens of problems and...
Αυτό λέει διορθώνω στο F26, ώστε να ανέβει η λογική του animation ότι αν κάνεις first time shot, θα κάνεις first time shot. Δεν θα περιμένει το παιχνίδι να σου κάνει delay την κίνηση γιατί διαβάζει ότι το άλλο πόδι θα είναι καλύτερο π.χ. Λέει ένα παράδειγμα.
Issues in terms of animation selection to make sure the game is more responsive than ever. And then another very important point
Ωραία.
is animation
Αυτό ήταν μια πολύ καλή πρόταση.
This one I can explain by saying we built our game to be an authentic representation of football, to look like football. And by nature, the animations that we put in the game have variability. There's different players, different abilities that we put in the game. Then we put the attributes on top of the animations to modify how fast animations can move. And like that, there's multiple layers where we adjust animations to make sure you can contact the ball. So then there's going to be differences, variability in those animations. So even when you're trying to perform a similar action, like let's say dribble turns, sometimes animations are going to be slightly longer, slightly shorter based on context.
Yeah,
if the ball is slightly further away from me, maybe the animation to touch the ball is slightly longer. And with that, sometimes you will come across animations that are different. And that's very important to create that difference. Those differences are very important to create variety in the game, to make sure you can play for hours and not see exactly the same outcome every time. But on the other side, we understand from the community that we want more consistency in animations. So you can really learn and master how the game will perform, and you want those animations to be as fast as possible. So we are working to make sure we find that balance in between animation variability and consistency, and making sure the game is very responsive. And with that in mind is how we designed the new dribbling system, dynamic dribbling, making sure animations again are more consistent, are faster, but there's still variety in the game. And
στην ουσία λίγο πολύ λένε αυτό που λέγαμε κι εμείς. Το είχα πει και εγώ, το έχουμε καβοντήσει και πολλές φορές, ότι είχε μέχρι τώρα, ας πούμε στο FC25, ανέφερε συγκεκριμένα ότι επειδή υπάρχει πολύ μεγάλη ποικιλία στα animation, τι γίνεται. Μια ίδια στιγμή μπορεί να παιχτεί με διαφορετικό τρόπο αναλόγως το animation που θα πάρει ο παίκτης ή το animation που θα γίνει εκείνη τη στιγμή στο παιχνίδι μέσα. Στο FC26 λέει, και εκεί φέρνει το dynamic dribbling, πάνε να το ισορροπήσουν αυτό, ώστε να έχουν ένα σταθερό γρήγορο dribbling, το οποίο αυτό θα φέρνει κάποιες παραπάνω λεπτομέρειες σε οποιαδήποτε πιθανή κατάσταση συμβαίνει το παιχνίδι. Δεν θα επηρεάζεται από το κάθε extra animation. Και το συζητάμε αυτό με τα πάρα πολλά animation. Εδώ τώρα πάνε κάνουν ένα βασικό dribbling animation, το οποίο θα είναι γρήγορο, και μετά πάνω εκεί θα πατάνε τα υπόλοιπα. Μ' αρέσει και αυτό που ακούω. Πάντως φαίνεται εδώ πέρα στρίβει πάρα πολύ πιο γρήγορα. Να δω και τους servers αν θα πει κάτι.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of different factors that lead to similar feedback. So trying to understand what's causing the online unresponsiveness is something.
Αυτός είναι ο κύριος Ντομινίκ Μπούσαρντ, αν το διαβάζω σωστά. Έχουμε μιλήσει με τα παιδιά αυτά στα γραφεία της έτσι έχουμε πάρα πολλές φορές μιλήσει. Με τα παιδιά, πολύ καλά παιδιά. Αυτός είναι ο κύριος τεχνικός director.
We've really spent a lot of time looking at this year, and it's spun lots of different working groups kind of tackling things like client-server code, or the gameplay simulation, which is what we're kind of focusing.
Άκουσα τη λέξη server code. Άκουσα να λέει server code.
That lead to similar feedback. So trying to understand what's causing the online unresponsiveness is something we've really spent a lot of time looking at this year, and it's spun lots of different working groups kind of tackling things like client-server code, or the gameplay simulation, which is what we're kind of focusing on today. And in that sense, one of the more frustrating situations when it doesn't play out the way you want is a first-time pass or a first-time shot.
First-time pass, first-time shot.
If your player ends up taking a touch before making that shot.
Αν ο παίκτης λέει κάνει ένα touch πριν κάνει το shot.
The chance might be gone. That will feel really unresponsive and poor. And that's something that we focused on a lot this year. So in terms of animation variety and completeness in those situations, as well as the code that's behind that, we've really improved the ability to find that animation and play it out properly. But we also analyzed, the input processing system and found some areas for opportunities. So we were able to save, a whole frame of input on those situations, allowing first-time passes and shots to happen a lot more often in 26 than in 25. There's been a lot of other improvements as well. If you look at like the player indicator above your player's head.
Γνωστά πράγματα δηλαδή, σε όλους ήταν αυτά. Σου λέει αυτό πάμε να το εξέλιψουμε όσο μπορούμε, σου λέει. Το καταλαβαίνουν και οι ίδιοι, αυτό είπε ο κύριος Ντομινίκ. Εδώ ότι πολλές φορές λέει πας να κάνεις first time shot ή first time πάσα και ο παίκτης κάνει control πρώτα. Και αυτό λέει είναι ενοχλητικό προφανώς. Και μπορώ να το πω και εγώ ότι όντως είναι πολύ ενοχλητικό. Προχωράμε.
Now that's something that we are also able to improve the responsiveness of. You'll see another extra frame early, and that makes a difference in terms of how quickly you can react to your next action or your next decision, things like that. We've added a lot of telemetry in the past in terms of tracking the details on the inputs the players are experiencing. So the lifetime of an input from the moment you pressed it to when it goes up to the server, to when it comes back, to when we simulate with it, to when we...
Ακούς τι λέει. Έχουμε λέξει να υπολογίσει το πόσο χρόνο κάνει το input πάτημα, λέει, που πατάς εσύ μέχρι να πάει στο server και από το server να πάει στο παιχνίδι. Λέει ωραία πράγματα. Άκου.
Things like that. We've added a lot of telemetry in the past in terms of tracking the details on the inputs the players are experiencing. So the lifetime of an input from the moment you pressed it to when it goes up to the server, to when it comes back, to when we simulate with it, to when we render it. And that's
πότε γίνεται το simulation, πότε γίνεται το render.
something we've added a lot more data this year to try and kind of close some of those gaps and get more information from the users. And this is something we can do remotely. But as you said, we did visit people, their houses, their headquarters. And I think just the conversation and experiencing it in person was very useful in terms of being able to get a feel for what they're talking about and kind of put some of their context to the data behind the scenes. And again, that's something that we're able to find and fix some issues. We were also able to kind of test their sensitivity to responsiveness. So we had a device, we were able to inject different types of latency just to...
Πέρα από τους servers, μην ξεχνάς ότι πάρα πολλές φορές εδώ πέρα το έχω κουβεντιάσει και το έχω πει και το έχουμε συζητήσει, αλλά έχω πει πάρα πολλές φορές ότι αυτό το server coding ήθελε αλλαγή ή ανανέωση. Και ο κύριος εδώ Ντομινίκ μιλάει για αυτό το server coding. Το οποίο δεν το έχω ξανακούσει να συζητάνε γι' αυτό. Αυτό λέει ο κύριος Ντομινίκ εδώ πέρα. Ότι έχουν ξαναδεί, τέλος πάντων, για να ξαναυπολογίσει πάλι το παιχνίδι, πότε πατάς εσύ το κουμπί, πότε κάνει το render, πότε γίνεται το simulation στο server.
See, how in tune, what can they feel, and there was quite a range, but some of our pro players very, very sensitive to the smallest amount of delay, which really motivated us to go after that we can get back in terms of this effort. And I expect a lot more. We have some things still in the works. We're expecting a lot of data coming in from 26 that we'll be able to analyze a lot.
Ακόμα κάνουν analyze, λέει, πράγματα, δεν το έχουν τελειώσει.
Feedback from users that we're hoping to get. And so it doesn't stop here. I think we've made a lot of improvements, but we plan to keep going on it.
Okay, so one more important point is that the fundamentals, the gameplay fundamentals in FC26, like dribbling, like locomotion, how fatigue works, they were all designed with responsiveness in mind. So dribbling, right away, when you start dribbling, you will feel like players move more, they move faster, the ball moves more when you are dribbling.
Ωραία.
It gives you the sense of responsiveness. Locomotion, you will feel that players are more explosive, they can move faster, they can turn faster,
Ωραία.
which also translates into more responsiveness.
Ωραία.
We redesigned fatigue to make sure that even at the last minute of the game...
Αυτό το redesign της κόπωσης όντως είναι καλό boost. Μένω το δούμε πώς θα είναι στο παιχνίδι, που πλέον φέτος οι παίκτες όταν θα κουράζονται ναι μεν, αλλά όταν ο παίκτης έρχεται στην κατοχή μας, θα έχει από την αρχή όλο το στάμινα. Και αυτό θα βοηθήσει πάρα πολύ στο responsiveness.
Players still feel responsive. And then we have more responsive passes as well, where you can press the button very late when the player is about to control the ball. You can still request a pass and then get that pass.
Αυτό το έχουν πει, γιατί πάσαμε μέχρι τελευταία στιγμή. Φέτος, λέει, μπορείς να προλάβεις να πατήσεις και να γίνει μια ενέργεια στο παιχνίδι μέχρι και ένα frame πριν. Έτσι έχουν πει, μέχρι ένα frame πριν. Το ένα frame πριν, παιδιά, είναι τρελό, να ξέρετε. Ένα frame πριν.
So all in, I can say that FC26 is the most responsive football game that we have ever created. And there's more improvements to the app, more responsive passes as well, where you can press the button very late when the player is about to control the ball. You can still request a pass and then get that pass. So all in, I can say that FC26 is the most responsive football game that we have ever created.
Το είπε, έτσι, το είπε. Το είπε. Ο κύριος Σαμ το είπε. Ξεκάθαρα. Σε μια πρόταση το είπε όλο.
FC26 is the most responsive football game that we have ever created.
Ever.
And there's more improvements to the online gameplay responsiveness in FC26. For example, for the pro players, the FC Pro connections, peer-to-peer specifically, will be faster. They will be smoother. We're investing in those in 26. Then we also fix multiple issues with detecting skill moves. In some cases, you would request a skill move, but the input simply wasn't being.
Ρε εσύ, λένε πολύ καλά πράγματα όμως. Πρόσεξε, άκους τι λέει. Με τα skill moves λέει. Πολλές φορές λέει πατάς να κάνεις skill move και δεν έκανε skill move λέει μέχρι τώρα. Αυτό συμβαίνει όντως.
Read by the system and you wouldn't get. In some cases, you would request a skill move, but the input simply wasn't being read by the system and you wouldn't.
Το input δεν το διάβαζε το σύστημα και δεν έκανες ποτέ τρίπλα. Πόσες φορές λέω, έχω κάνει skill move, πού είναι το skill move.
Get the player to perform the skill move you wanted. We're fixing many of those issues. And lastly,
το διορθώνουν και αυτό λέει στο FC26.
We have a new overlay as well that tells you when your connection is unstable and also tells us information that can help us understand the problems better. And the last thing that I want to say is that all the improvements that we just went through are not just one thing that we do now and then we forget about it. We are going to continue working with the community very closely throughout the entire cycle to make sure we understand what's left in there in terms of input delay, in terms of problems that
ναι, ότι αυτά σαν αναβαθμίσεις θα γίνονται και στη διάρκεια του παιχνιδιού.
FC26 is responsive.
Ωραία, εντάξει, λογικό. Τα update τα λεγόμενα.
Based on internal feedback, based on early feedback, that the fundamentals of the game are making the game more responsive, and with all the improvements that we just discussed, the game feels faster, feels better. But again, this is something that we will continue to invest in the next months and years.
Months and years. Ξεκινάμε, σου λέμε, μια καινούργια βάση και από εδώ και πώς προχωράμε με αυτή τη νέα βάση. Μάλιστα.